I realized my life had already been decided without me the night my wife thanked me for understanding something I had never agreed to. She said it casually, almost lovingly, while pouring tea into 2 cups we didn't even drink anymore. The words sounded soft, reasonable, like they belonged in a healthy marriage. But they landed in my chest like a verdict. "You've always been so understanding," she said. "That's why this will work." I remember staring at her, trying to figure out what exactly this was. We had been married for 7 years. Not the loud, dramatic kind of marriage people gossip about, but the quiet kind that slowly rewrites who you are. The kind where you stop arguing because it feels pointless, where compromises start feeling one-sided, but you convince yourself that's just adulthood. Her name was Mira. Calm, polite. Everyone loved her. My parents adored her in that reverent way reserved for daughters-in-law who never raised their voice and always remember birthdays. I used to think I was lucky. That night started normally. Too normally. Dinner was reheated leftovers. The TV played something neither of us watched. She moved around the kitchen with that efficiency that comes from knowing a space better than the person standing in it. Then she sat across from me and said, "I spoke to my parents today." I nodded. That wasn't unusual. Mira spoke to her parents every day. They lived barely 40 minutes away, but somehow managed to be involved in every decision we made. "They're worried," she continued. "About what?" I asked. "About us." That should have been my first warning. But I was tired. Work had been draining me for months, and home had stopped feeling like rest. I rubbed my face and waited for her to explain. "They think we've been stuck," she said carefully. "Financially, socially." I laughed a little. Not because it was funny, but because it felt absurd. We owned our apartment. We both had stable jobs. No debt, no drama, just quiet. "We're fine," I said. "We're comfortable." She smiled at me the way you smile at someone who doesn't understand what's really happening. Comfortable isn't the same as secure. That's when she said it. They want us to consider moving closer to them and restructuring things. Restructuring what? I asked. "Our priorities," she said. "Our assets." I felt something tighten in my chest. "What does that mean?" She reached across the table and touched my hand. "It means putting everything under one roof. One plan, one vision." I pulled my hand back. "Mira, what are you talking about?" She exhaled slowly, like she'd rehearsed this. "They think it would be better if we transferred the apartment to my father's name. Temporarily, just until some things are sorted." The room went silent. I actually checked the TV to see if I'd misheard her because my brain refused to process it. "You want me to give your father my apartment?" I said. "Our apartment," she corrected gently. "I bought this before we got married," I said. "With my savings." "Yes, and I've lived here for 7 years," she replied. "I've invested my time, my energy. This is our home." "That doesn't answer why your father's name needs to be on it." She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Barely noticeable, but I saw it. "There are business reasons," she said. "Legal things. It's complicated." Complicated. That word again. "No," I said immediately. "That's not happening." Her expression didn't change. She didn't get angry. She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. "I knew you'd say that," she said, "but I also know you'll come around." Something about the certainty in her voice unsettled me. "What makes you so sure?" I asked. "Because you always do," she said softly. "You always put us first." That sentence haunted me long after that night ended. Over the next few days, the pressure started building in small, almost polite ways. Her mother called to check in. Her father invited me for tea to discuss the future. Even my own parents mentioned how lucky I was to have married into such a well-connected family. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. How Mira always took phone calls in the other room. How she'd already started packing away some of my documents to keep them safe. How conversations seemed to pause whenever I entered a room during family gatherings. It felt like everyone was walking 3 steps ahead of me, smiling, waiting for me to catch up to a decision I hadn't agreed to make. One evening, I came home early from work and found Mira sitting at the dining table with a file open. My file, bank statements, property papers, insurance documents. She looked up, startled for just a second before smiling. "You're early. What is this?" I asked. "I was organizing," she said quickly. "Your paperwork was a mess. Why are copies missing?" I asked. She stiffened. "What copies?" "The original property deed," I said. "Where is it?" She closed the file slowly. I gave it to my father. The words didn't register immediately. When they did, my hand started shaking. "You did what?" I asked. "He just needed to review it," she said. "You're overreacting." I felt heat rise in my chest. "You took my documents without asking me." "I'm your wife," she snapped, irritation finally cracking through. "I don't need permission to handle family matters." "This is not a family matter," I said. "This is my property." Her eyes hardened. "See, this is the problem. You keep saying mine. We're supposed to be a team. A team doesn't steal from each other," I said. She stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. "How dare you say that?" "Then bring the papers back," I said. "Today." She crossed her arms. "No." That was the moment I realized I wasn't arguing with my wife. I was negotiating with someone who had already decided the outcome. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because we fought, but because lying next to her felt unsafe in a way I couldn't explain. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You should cooperate. It will be easier for everyone." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. A second message followed. "Families who resist don't stay families for long." I didn't reply. I couldn't. The next morning, Mira acted like nothing had happened. She packed my lunch, asked about my meetings, kissed my cheek before leaving. But something had shifted. I started digging quietly, checking accounts, reviewing statements, looking for things I'd trusted her to manage. What I found made my stomach drop. Joint savings drained in small increments. Investments moved without my signature. A loan application in progress, under my name. All roads led back to her parents. And suddenly, every conversation from the past year replayed in my head with new meaning. Every time I've been told not to worry. Every time I've been praised for being easygoing. They weren't asking for my consent. They were waiting for my surrender. And I had a sinking feeling that the real betrayal hadn't even revealed itself yet. The first thing I did after reaching the office that morning was lock myself in a conference room and call the bank. I told myself I was overreacting, that there had to be a reasonable explanation, that Mira wouldn't do something irreversible behind my back. The woman on the phone was polite, professional, and completely indifferent to the fact that my life was unraveling in real time. "Yes, sir," she said after verifying my details. "There was a loan inquiry initiated 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks? I repeated. "I never applied for a loan. It appears to be a property-backed loan," she continued, "using your apartment as collateral." My mouth went dry. "Has it been approved?" There was a pause. The kind that tells you the answer before the words arrive. "It's pending final documentation," she said. "Some signatures are still required." Mine. I hung up and just sat there, staring at the wall. 3 weeks. That meant this had started long before that conversation at the dining table. Long before she called it restructuring. Long before she smiled and told me she loved me. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a plan already in motion. When I got home that evening, Mira was unusually cheerful. Music played softly in the background. She was cooking something elaborate, the kind of meal she only made when guests were coming over. "Your parents are stopping by," she said casually. "And mine." I froze. "Why?" She didn't look at me. "We need to talk things through. Together." I wanted to say no. I wanted to walk out. But something inside me needed to see how far this went. Needed confirmation that I wasn't imagining the betrayal. They arrived within an hour. Smiles. Compliments. My mother hugged Mira tightly. Her father patted my back like I was already part of some shared joke. We sat around the table, tea untouched, tension thick enough to taste. Mira's father cleared his throat. "We're all family here," he began. "So let's speak openly." I nodded. "That would be nice." He smiled, unbothered by the edge of my voice. The world is changing. One income isn't enough anymore. One property isn't security. I have two incomes, I said, and one property that I paid for. My mother shot me a warning look. Don't be rude. Mira's mother leaned forward. Beta, no one is taking anything from you. We're trying to help you grow. By putting my apartment in your name? I asked. Silence. Then Mira spoke. It's temporary. You're making it sound worse than it is. Then why wasn't I told 3 weeks ago? I asked. Her father sighed, as if disappointed. Because you're emotional. That word again. Not angry. Not suspicious. Emotional. We knew you'd panic, he continued. Men get attached to assets. It clouds judgment. Something snapped in me. So you applied for a loan using my property without my consent. It's not finalized, he said calmly, because we were waiting for you to come around. My father finally spoke. Son, think practically. This could benefit everyone. Everyone except me. I said. Mira reached for my hand again. I pulled away. You don't trust me anymore, she said softly, tears welling up. After all these years, I looked at her and realized something terrifying. She genuinely believed she was right. You already broke my trust, I said. You took my documents. You had a loan application. You involved everyone except me. Her tears fell. My mother rushed to her side. Look what you're doing to her, my mother said. She's only trying to build a future with you. I laughed. I couldn't help it. A future where I don't own anything? Her father's tone hardened. You're overthinking. Once the loan is approved, the money will help expand our business. Profits will come back to you too. And if it fails? I asked. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I want my documents back, I said. All of them. Tomorrow. Mira shook her head. You're being unreasonable. I stood up. Then this conversation is over. Her father's voice dropped. Sit down. I didn't. Listen carefully, he said. If you walk away from this, you walk away from more than just money. I turned to look at him. Is that a threat? He smiled. It's reality. That night, Mira didn't sleep on the couch. She slept in the bedroom, alone. I lay awake in the living room, replaying every moment of the past 7 years. Every compromise. Every time I'd been told I was lucky. Every decision I'd let slide because I loved her. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay. I took a day off work and went straight to a lawyer. He listened quietly, flipping through the documents I'd managed to gather. You're not the first, he said finally. Families do this more often than people admit. Can they take the apartment? I asked. Not without your signature, he said. But they can make your life very uncomfortable trying. I went home and packed a bag. Mira watched from the doorway. You're leaving, she said flatly. For now, I said. She didn't stop me. She didn't beg. She just said, you're making a mistake. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed again. A message from the same unknown number. You think walking away protects you. It doesn't. I blocked the number. 2 days later, I received a court notice. Mira had filed a petition claiming emotional neglect and financial abandonment. She was asking for exclusive rights to the apartment until the case was resolved. That's when I understood the full picture. The loan was never the endgame. The apartment was. And the woman I married wasn't caught in her parents' plans. She was part of them. The court notice sat on the table like a loaded weapon. I read it over and over, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less real. Emotional neglect, financial abandonment, exclusive right to reside in the apartment. My apartment, the place I'd worked 12 years to buy, the place I'd painted myself, the place that still smelled like the incense my grandmother used to light when she visited. Mira wasn't just trying to scare me anymore. She was trying to erase me. My lawyer wasn't surprised. This is leverage, he said. They want you back at the table. Once you panic, they'll offer a settlement. What kind of settlement? I asked. He didn't hesitate. You sign, or you lose time, money, peace. I laughed bitterly. And if I don't, then it gets ugly. Ugly was already here. The next few weeks were a blur of hearings, paperwork, and carefully worded messages from relatives who suddenly remembered I existed. My mother called every day, alternating between guilt and fear. "You're breaking the family," she said one evening. "No, Iropia. They broke me." Mira never called. She communicated only through her lawyer now. Efficient, cold, surgical. She moved back into the apartment while the case was pending. I wasn't even allowed to enter. The first time I drove past the building and saw lights on in my living room, something inside my chest collapsed. That space was supposed to be safe. Instead, it had become occupied territory. Then something unexpected happened. My grandmother's lawyer called again. "There's something you should come see," he said. I assumed it was paperwork. Another delay. Another headache. It wasn't. He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. This was meant to be opened only if there was a dispute over assets. Inside was a handwritten letter. My grandmother's handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. She wrote about Mira, about her parents, about things she'd noticed long before I had, about arguments she'd overheard, about documents she'd seen Mira photocopy late at night, and then the line that changed everything. "If they ever try to take what is yours, know this: the apartment was never your only inheritance." Attached was a notarized addendum to her will, a trust, one that owned the apartment outright, one that named me the sole controller, one that explicitly barred spouses from claiming residency or rights. I felt dizzy. "They hid this," I whispered. The lawyer nodded. "Your grandmother was very strategic." Within 48 hours, my lawyer filed a response. The tone of the case changed immediately. Mira's petition was suddenly weak. Her claims didn't apply to trust-owned property. Her demand for residency had no legal standing. Her lawyer called mine the same day. They wanted to talk. The next hearing was short. The judge dismissed her request. Just like that, the leverage vanished. 2 days later, Mira called me directly for the first time in months. "You set me up," she said. "No, only. You tried to take what wasn't yours." Her voice cracked. "After everything I did for you, I closed my eyes. You don't get credit for love you weaponize." She cried. She accused. She begged. I didn't move. The divorce finalized quietly after that. No alimony, no apartment, no shared assets. Her parents stopped calling. My parents needed time. A lot of it. Some wounds don't close neatly. The day I finally walked back into my apartment alone, the place felt unfamiliar. Emptier, quieter, but mine. I opened the windows, let the air move again. That night, I slept on the floor with no furniture, no noise, no fear of what was being signed behind my back. And for the first time in months, I slept deeply. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. Sometimes it comes wrapped in love, tradition, and smiles at the dinner table. And sometimes the only way to survive it is to stop negotiating your worth. If you were in my place, would you have fought back or walked away earlier? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real stories like this, make sure you subscribe. The first thing I noticed was that everyone else already knew. Not suspected, not guessed, knew. I realized it in the way the room went quiet when I walked in the way conversations snapped shut mid-sentence, in the way people suddenly found their phones fascinating. I had spent months thinking I was losing my mind, wondering why my life felt like it was sliding sideways while everyone around me seemed perfectly steady. It turns out I was the last person to be told the truth about my own marriage. And by the time I finally understood what was happening, it wasn't just my relationship that was already over. My reputation, my friendships, and my sense of reality had been quietly dismantled behind my back. It started small. That's how these things always start. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 7 years. No kids yet. Not because we didn't want them, but because we were being responsible. Careers first. Stability first. That was Emily's phrase. She liked plans. She liked timelines. She liked telling people we were doing things the right way. From the outside, we looked solid. We hosted dinners. We went on double dates. We posted smiling photos from weekend trips. People told us we were lucky. I believed them. Then the distance crept in. Emily started staying late at work. At first it made sense. She'd just been promoted to operations manager at her firm. More responsibility, more stress. I cooked dinner more often. I waited up. I listened while she vented about meetings and deadlines. I told myself this was what partnership looked like. But slowly, she stopped venting to me. Her phone became private in a way it hadn't been before. Screen down. Always locked. Notifications off. She started taking calls in the other room. If I asked who it was, she'd answer casually, but just a second too late, like she was translating in her head first. "You're imagining things," she told me once, smiling like I just said something silly. "You're stressed." I accepted that answer because I loved her. Because trusting your spouse is supposed to be the default, not something you have to justify. The first crack came at a friend's birthday party. It was loud, crowded, one of those house parties where everyone knows everyone else through overlapping circles. I was grabbing drinks from the kitchen when I noticed Emily standing unusually close to Mark, one of her co-workers. I knew Mark. I met him before. We did beers together. He was fine. Normal. Married too, as far as I knew. They weren't doing anything obvious. No touching. No whispering. Just leaning in, laughing, bodies angled toward each other in a way that made the rest of the room disappear. When Emily saw me, she startled. Actually startled. Like she'd forgotten I existed for a second. Later that night, on the drive home, I asked about it. "Mark?" she said, like she was surprised I even remembered his name. We were just talking about work. Something in her tone made my chest tighten. Everyone else was in the living room. I said carefully, "You guys were kind of tucked away." She sighed, exaggerated, already irritated. "Are you really doing this? I can't even have a conversation without you reading into it." I dropped it. Again. Because pushing would make me the paranoid husband. Because I didn't want to be that guy. The next few weeks felt off in ways I couldn't quite explain. Friends canceled plans last minute. Group chats went quiet when I chimed in. One night, I walked into a bar where we were supposed to meet friends and found Emily already there, laughing with people who went noticeably still when they saw me. "Hey," I said, confused. "Oh," Emily said too brightly. "You made it. Made it. Like I wasn't expected." On the way home, she was silent. When I asked what was wrong, she said, "Nothing," in a way that meant everything. That night, after she fell asleep, I did something I had never done before. I checked her phone. I know how that sounds. I know the rules people like to recite about trust and privacy. But something deep in my gut was screaming that I was missing a piece of my own life, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. Her phone was locked, but I knew the code. She hadn't changed it. That almost hurt more. I didn't find what I expected. There were no explicit messages, no photos, no obvious smoking gun. What I found was worse. Archived chats, deleted threads, calendar entries marked late meeting that lined up with weekends I'd been out of town. Dozens of calls to one number saved under a generic name. And then there were the emails. Not love letters, not confessions. Logistics. Did you tell him yet? People are starting to ask questions. We need to be careful around Alex. Everyone already assumes you're together. It's only him who doesn't know. Him. Me. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone shaking in my hands, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid it would wake her. The room felt unreal, like I'd stepped into a version of my life that had been running parallel to mine without my knowledge. The worst message came from someone I recognized. Lisa, one of Emily's closest friends. Someone who'd hugged me, eaten at our table, asked me about my job, my family. She deserves to be happy, the message read. You can't keep pretending forever. Pretending. I put the phone back exactly where it was and lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction from the last few months with new eyes. In the cold light of day, I asked Emily directly, "Are you having an affair?" She didn't deny it. She closed her eyes, took a breath, sat down across from me, like we were about to discuss a household budget. "It's complicated," she said. I laughed. I couldn't help it. "No, it's really not." She told me then. Or at least, she told me her version. It had started emotionally. It had gotten out of hand. She hadn't planned for it to go this far. She'd been unhappy for a long time. She didn't want to hurt me. I asked how long. She hesitated. Almost a year. A year. A year of dinners, holidays, shared beds, shared plans. All while she was living a second life that everyone else seemed fully aware of. "Who knows?" I asked. She looked away. Most people. That answer landed harder than the betrayal itself. Friends, co-workers, her family, even some of mine, apparently. They'd noticed the shift, the chemistry, the way she talked about Mark when I wasn't around, the way she avoided me in group settings. No one told me. Not one person pulled me aside and said, "Hey, are you okay?" Not one person warned me I was being lied to. Instead, they watched. They whispered. They picked sides. Emily said she'd been planning to tell me, that she just needed time, that she didn't want to be the bad guy. I asked her one last question. "Did you ever plan to choose me?" She didn't answer. That silence was the end of our marriage, whether the paperwork had caught up or not. What I didn't understand yet was that this wasn't just the collapse of a relationship. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Because once the truth was out, people stopped pretending around me. And what they revealed next changed how I saw every single person in my life. And that part was somehow even harder to survive. By the time Emily moved out, the story had already been written for me. I just hadn't read it yet. She packed while I was at work. Not because I asked her to, but because it was easier that way. Fewer tears, fewer questions, fewer chances for me to say something she couldn't undo. When I came home, the apartment felt hollow in a way I'd never experienced before. Drawers half empty, closet uneven, her mug gone from the sink, her shoes missing by the door. On the counter was a note. Not an apology. Not really. I hope someday you understand. I didn't mean for it to hurt this much. That was it. I threw it away without rereading it. The days after blurred together. I went to work. I answered emails. I nodded through meetings. I slept badly and woke up worse. Everyone kept telling me I looked tired. No one asked why. What hurt more than the betrayal itself was the sudden clarity. Now that I knew, everything made sense. The awkward pauses, the half smiles, the way people stopped inviting me places but kept inviting her, the way conversations died when I entered the room. They weren't confused. They were guilty. I tested the theory without meaning to. A week after Emily left, I ran into Mark at a coffee shop near my office. He was alone, sitting by the window, typing on his laptop like nothing in the world had changed. Like he hadn't played a starring role in detonating my life. He saw me. His shoulders stiffened. He didn't get up. He walked over. "Hey," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Hey," he replied, swallowing. "Alex." We stood there for a second, suspended in something thick and uncomfortable. "So," I said, gesturing vaguely between us, "how long were you planning on pretending you didn't know who I was?" His face flushed. "Look, man, no, interrupa. I just want an answer." He glanced around, like he was worried someone might overhear. That told me everything. Almost from the beginning, he said quietly. "The beginning. How many people knew?" I asked. He hesitated. "That's not fair," he said. "You shouldn't be asking me." I smiled, sharp and humorless. Funny, that's exactly what I thought when everyone decided not to tell me. He didn't argue. I left without another word, my coffee forgotten on the counter. My hands shook all the way back to the office. That night, I started getting messages. Not apologies, explanations. Friends reaching out, suddenly concerned, suddenly available. Long paragraphs about how they didn't want to get involved, how it wasn't their place, how relationships are complicated, how they assumed I knew. I noticed how none of them said they were sorry. I stopped replying. A few days later, Emily's sister called me. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," she said gently, like she was doing me a favor. "What do you want?" I asked. She paused. I just wanted to say, I didn't agree with how things were handled. Handled. Did you know? I asked. Yes, she admitted. How long? Long enough. I closed my eyes. Then why are you calling me now? Because I feel awful, she said. And because Emily is not doing well. That almost made me laugh. She has support, I said. She always did. I hung up before she could respond. Weeks passed. The dust settled. Or at least, it looked like it did from the outside. Emily and Mark went public. Not dramatically. No announcement. Just subtle shifts. Photos together. Casual captions. Inside jokes and comments from people who had apparently been on it all along. I stopped checking after the third time. It made me feel physically sick. What I didn't expect was how the story would start mutating. Somewhere along the line, the narrative shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. People started framing it as we grew apart, as mutual, as unfortunate but understandable. Emily became careful with her words. She talked about how lonely she'd been, how unsupported she'd felt, how she tried to communicate and hadn't been heard. And slowly, subtly, I became the background villain in my own marriage. I heard about it from a coworker I trusted. They're saying you checked her phone, she told me quietly, like it was a secret. That you were controlling. They, Emily, and some of her friends. Of course. The irony was almost impressive. Months of deception, and the thing people latched onto was the one moment I stopped trusting blindly. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed quiet. Then something unexpected happened. One of Emily's friends, Sarah, showed up at my door. I hadn't spoken to her since the breakup. She looked nervous, twisting her hands like a teenager waiting for bad news. I shouldn't be here, she said, but I can't stop thinking about it. About what? I asked. The way we treated you. That was new. She told me things I hadn't known. Or maybe I had deep down, but hearing them out loud changed something. They joked about how oblivious I was. About how kind I was. About how nice guys never see it coming. They'd reassured Emily when she felt guilty. Told her it was okay because she was unhappy. Told her she deserved more. They'd also talked about me. About how I wouldn't handle it well. About how telling me would blow things up. So they did. I'm sorry, Sarah said. Eyes shiny. I should have told you. I believed her. And that scared me more than anything. Because it meant the rest of them weren't sorry. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet apartment and tried to understand how a dozen people could watch someone be slowly dismantled and call it staying out of it. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't just about Emily. This was about what people do when honesty is inconvenient. Once that thought settled in, I started seeing patterns everywhere. At work, in friendships, in family. I started noticing who avoided eye contact, who overcompensated, who acted like nothing had happened and expected me to do the same. And then, just when I thought the worst was over, I received an email that pulled the floor out from under me again. It was from a lawyer. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the name. My father. I hadn't spoken to him in months. Not since a tense dinner where he gently suggested that relationships are rarely one-sided and asked if I considered my role in what happened. The email was short. There's something you need to know about the house. Call me. The house. The one I grew up in. The one my parents had always promised would eventually be mine. The one they'd insisted was secure. I called him. He sounded tired. Older. We made a decision, he said, before everything with Emily came out. My stomach tightened. What kind of decision? We transferred ownership. To who? I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. There was a pause. To your sister. I sat down hard on the edge of the couch. What? I asked. She needed it more, he said. And we assumed you had your own life. My own life. The same life that had just collapsed while everyone watched. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I thanked him for telling me and hung up. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling something shift inside me. The betrayal wasn't isolated anymore. It wasn't just romantic. It wasn't just social. It was structural. People I loved had made decisions about my life without me. They decided what I could handle, what I deserved. What was easier for them? And the scariest part wasn't the pain. It was the clarity. Because once you see who's willing to sacrifice you for comfort, you can't unsee it. And I was just beginning to understand how deep that willingness went. By the time I realized how far it went, it was already too late to pretend any of this was accidental. The house transfer wasn't just a family decision. It was a signal. Once you start looking at betrayal as a pattern instead of an event, everything lines up with uncomfortable precision. Conversations I'd brushed off. Awkward silences. The way people talked around me instead of to me. They weren't confused or conflicted. They were aligned. I didn't confront my parents right away. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed to understand the full picture before I spoke. I needed facts, not emotions. Emotions had already cost me enough. So I did something I'd never done before. I started asking questions quietly. I met my sister for coffee. She was nervous the moment she sat down, fingers wrapped too tightly around her cup. "I know Dad told you about the house," she said quickly. "I didn't ask for it, but you didn't refuse it either," I replied. She looked down. "They said you were doing fine, that you wouldn't mind." There was again, that assumption, that convenient story people told themselves so they wouldn't have to feel guilty. "Did you know about Emily?" I asked calmly. Her head snapped up. "What?" Before I did, she hesitated, just long enough. "Yes," she whispered. Something in my chest went quiet. Not numb, clear. "How long?" "Not long," she said. "A few weeks maybe. I thought it was just a phase. And you thought I deserved that?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "I thought it would resolve itself. It always does, doesn't it? As long as the fallout doesn't land on you." I paid for my coffee and left before she could say anything else. There was nothing left to hear. Over the next month, the consequences of silence started revealing themselves in small, ugly ways. I stopped getting invited to family gatherings. Not explicitly, just quietly excluded. Group chats went silent. Birthdays passed without calls. My absence became normalized faster than my presence ever had. At work, things shifted too. Mark had been promoted. I found out through an internal announcement that praised his integrity and leadership. The irony was almost poetic. When I ran into him in the hallway, he nodded like nothing had happened. That was the moment something hardened inside me. I wasn't going to beg for honesty anymore. I wasn't going to explain myself. And I definitely wasn't going to protect people who had already decided I was expendable. So I started documenting. Emails, messages, timelines. Not obsessively, methodically. I didn't plan revenge. I planned clarity. A few weeks later, HR requested a meeting. Apparently, concerns had been raised about my attitude, about how I wasn't engaging the way I used to, about how I seemed distant. I listened quietly, took notes, asked questions, then I handed over a folder. I watched their expressions change as they read. Dates, screenshots, conflicts of interest, internal policy violations they hadn't bothered to look for because it was easier not to. The meeting ended early. 2 weeks after that, Mark was gone. No announcement this time. Just an empty desk and a vague email about restructuring. Emily tried to reach out that same day. I didn't answer. The truth has a way of traveling faster than lies once it's released. Friends who had avoided me suddenly wanted to talk. Family members wanted to clear the air. Even my parents asked if we could start fresh. I realized something important then. People don't miss you when they lose you. They miss you when losing you cost them something. I didn't go back to the house. I didn't reclaim what had been given away. I didn't need to. What I reclaimed was far more valuable. My sense of reality. I stopped questioning my instincts. I stopped minimizing my reactions. I stopped translating other people's comfort into my responsibility. Months later, my sister sent a long message. Apologies layered with excuses. Love mixed with fear. She said she hoped one day I'd forgive her. I didn't reply. Forgiveness isn't something you owe people who never risk telling you the truth. The last I heard, Emily and Mark didn't last. Turns out trust built on secrecy has an expiration date. Funny how that works. I moved into a smaller place across town. New routines, New boundaries. New people who didn't know me as the guy who tolerated silence. And sometimes late at night, I think about how close I came to staying quiet too. To swallowing it all just to keep the peace. I'm glad I didn't. Because losing people who were willing to watch me be lied to wasn't a loss. It was a correction. And if you've read this far, I'm curious. What would you have done in my place? Stayed quiet for the sake of family and friends? Or burned the comfort to protect your self-respect? Let me know what you think, and if stories like this hit close to home, stick around. There are more truths worth telling.